Our next speaker is unfortunately not able to join us in person. She's had to send in a recording, so unfortunately we won't be able to have any Q&A for her. However, we are still going to be very privileged to hear from her. I'm certainly looking forward to hearing what she says today. With people doing extended hours from home, you know, and just as we've been speaking to with Damia, we're seeing increasing number of people burning out and taking a lot of stress into their lives. And she has her articles look at new insights and ways and healthy ways for the industry to shift and adapt with that. She brings a whole fresh look at our relationship with work and how to bring mindfulness, safety, and trust into our teams and workplace. She's led product marketing efforts in startups and Fortune 500 technology companies. She was recognized as one of the top 50 product marketing influencers in both 2019 and 2020. And in addition to that, she was awarded the Positioning Maestro of the Year in 2020 by Product Marketing Alliance for redefining standards and helping shape the evolution of PPM. Very impressive credentials behind her. She's also a mentor and facilitator at Women in APIs and will speak to us today on an API narrative, a true story of APIs and I.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining today. Today, I'm going to talk to you about API narrative, a true story of APIs and I. Now, I would like you to take a few steps and let's go and imagine a world where business and IT are speaking the same language of APIs. We have shared OKRs, whether it's business influence or impact, and every day we wake up to be inspired by the power of APIs. Now, wouldn't that be an awesome world? What if we can tell the world the same narrative from API design to API lifecycle management? So join me in hearing my story of how I joined the API movement and as a product marketing manager for API management at Boomi in 2016, and more recently in 2020, advocating for women in APIs to bring diversity, inclusion, and belonging around the world. So join me on this ride. We'll kick off with a short agenda to give you an idea of what's coming in the next 20-25 minutes. We'll start off with a little bit about me, a quick introduction, give you a lens of what API looks like from a business viewpoint, talk to you about the rise of the API economy, and also give you a lens into what are the digital transformation trends that we hear, and wrap it up with how I joined Women in APIs and some of the awesome things that we are setting out for ourselves. So to kick it off, this is a little bit about me. I call this my picture perfect introduction. And as much as I love to travel, I'm capturing memories in what I have around me today. And I've brought mindfulness and essentialism, diversity and belonging as some of the core elements of what makes me, me. I'm passionate about product marketing, and I'm also excited to be part of the Women in APIs community. And so you'll hear a lot about aspects of this throughout the presentation. You'll see photos and visuals. That's just who I am. And I always believe that the world is a book, and those who do not travel only have read one page. So my philosophy in product marketing has always been about simplicity. If I cannot explain it simply, then it means that I don't understand it well enough. And I also try to believe that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And I think Apple has probably given us the best example of it in all shapes and forms. So I don't need to explain further from there. But let's actually talk a little bit about what is an API and what does that viewpoint look like. And so when I set out in my first experience as part of Sales Kickoff to help our sales team understand what API management was, at first, I didn't quite understand why they didn't get what API was. But then I took a step back and actually said, okay, let me try to find some analogies that you can actually resonate with. So one analogy that I'd come across was about restaurants. And I knew that, okay, this is a good one because everybody understands what a restaurant does. And it will be a good way to kind of map the examples together. And so once again, it's API, not IPA. I know when you talk about restaurants, everyone's hungry and looking forward to what is the next meal that you have out there. So I took the example of, think about a customer placing an order, think of APIs as the menus and the list of dishes, the order that you place to order a specific dish in your restaurant. And then what comes back from the chef or the kitchen is your API response. And that's when it clicked, and folks would be like, Div, this is the first time I actually understood what an API was. And that made me really think about how can we make it easier for businesses and business folks alike to better understand how do we speak about this together in the same way. And there's one key driver that's driving all this attention for APIs. And that's because a lot of companies and products are now becoming more a platform. And it's no more just about, hey, let me tell you about the one product that I have. It's about, let me tell you about what we can do with our platform together. And that's a big shift. So today, you've seen APIs everywhere, whether you know it or not. There's a weather API when you check your smartphone every morning to see what the weather is like. There is a retail and shipping API when you place an order, whether it's to a retail store, whether it's to a restaurant, or even maybe one of those rides that you take. And also you have a banking API when you're checking your balance on the phone. All of these are powered by APIs, but I guess we just didn't know it, or we didn't really think about it in that same way. So what has happened? And this is where I always encourage all of you to think about what is your favorite API if you have one. Feel free to share that in the chat, and I would love to look forward to seeing those responses. Now, when you are actually engaging with your audience and with your customers, how do you make sure you have the right API for the right reasons? And this is where I think the rise of the API economy came into existence, because it wasn't just that APIs will happen in one fine morning. There was a big shift from going from SaaS to XSaaS, which was all everything as a service, so that every tangible object can be offered as a service. And this is a great article that I had looked at from Rakuten that talked about this evolution of APIs. And so now that we have, whether you call it an API factory or whether you call it the API provider, you also have the API consumer, the developer on the other side. And that's the interaction that's led to this rise of the API economy. Now, the beauty of it all is APIs can do a lot of things, right? You can think about the data that it's aggregating from different sources. You can think of an API as an extension to a business process that exists. It could also very well be that an API is providing that backend support that it needs for giving you that experience. And it can also be something along the lines of providing APIs that will help make decisions on behalf of the user. Now, these are all part of the user developer experience that you could look for. But some of the things that actually caught my attention, and so I started diving a little bit further into what does the future of APIs look like? And so what you're seeing on the right is what we had in Boomi in around 2016, 2017, where we talked about API mediation. And we are looking at how do we bring different layers from the traditional services that exist, whether it's legacy systems or applications, and providing that API mediation layer to interact with your customers. So like for me, as an example, a mobile banking app. How do I make sure that my data is secure and that only I, as the specific owner or the user, have access to it? There are so many fintech apps, there are third-party apps, there are so many different ways you can interact with a customer today. And how do you make sure that you have the right mechanisms in place, whether it's the governance, whether it's providing mediation, providing the right economies of scale, if you will, all of those coming together. And so when I looked at what does the future of APIs look like, as from the Rakuten blog, a lot of them were tied to the experience for the end customer. So better API experience on mobile devices. Think of changing how you actually engage with APIs, think of new business models, whether it's your event-driven APIs, having a role to kind of play in that, whether it's thinking of when you schedule a trip like on Uber or applications like ride-sharing applications, the app automatically assigns a driver and then you get notified. And then at the end of the day, there are a lot of decisions that are happening behind the scenes through these event-driven APIs. And so there are new business models that are coming into existence that didn't exist probably 5 years ago. And then you're also seeing a lot of standardization, because now you are looking at bringing standardization of how APIs are defined and creating an interoperable way. You're trying to bring that aspects of open API initiatives into the flow. And these are all great things because now you are actually streamlining some of those operations that exist. And then you also saw this rise of microservices. And whether microservices are going to be the biggest contributor to the adoption of APIs, I think time will tell. But as a matter of fact, I think redefining how APIs are interacted with, I think, and deployed are also a big key aspect. And then you also have your API-driven architecture for end user apps. Now, all of these 1 to 5 were exciting, but the one that caught my most attention was number 6. APIs as information superhighways for enterprises. Now, as a business user, I know that there is a lot of challenges that we have, whether it's the data silos that exist across different departments and organizations. And if you, as an enterprise, can help break that data silo, help me with bringing initiatives together for data syndication, for data analytics, those are pathways that you can help unlock a lot of potential that is sitting behind the firewall. And that's where I think that the biggest force for the future of APIs is. And so you'll start seeing more and more organizations looking for solutions like helping unlock the data with APIs. Now, all of that is great, but let's talk a little bit about digital transformation and what does API trends look like. Now, we as an organization and as a society, I think, are starting to see more and more about digital transformation. So I'm going to share this slide here that talks a little bit about what does digital transformation look like. And so Forrester did this study in 2018, which I think is still valid, asking the specific question: which of the following best describes your firm's digital transformation? Now, many organizations are on this journey. They want to improve their interactions with customers, partners, with lines of business. They know that APIs are not an end, but they know that they need to work through the strategy and kind of work through the process for it. And so the interesting part of all of this, if you pay attention to all the way on the right, the customers are saying, hey, we are 21% complete on our digital transformation. But the reality is no one's complete on the digital transformation because it's a journey. It's not an end state. And so that shift, I think, is opening up more conversations. It's bringing more awareness into what does it look like? What does the evolution look like for those transformation? And how can we be always on the cutting edge, always looking at innovative ways to either disrupt ourselves or disrupt the industry that we are in. And that's a very exciting space to be. So the other aspect that once we have realized that digital transformation is the goal, was to ask, okay, what does that primary focus of process improvement look like for you? And so a couple of years ago, and this is also a study from 2018, when they asked about digital process automation. And so 2 years ago, which was around 2016, cost reduction was the number one. But gradually over the years, with the last year, it has gone down to 8%. Then the other factors that were measured were worker productivity, which had its own downfalls. And then we also had a trend for improving customer experience, which was great. Everybody wants to have a better customer experience. So that is natural. But you also started seeing a dip in that around in 2020. And then the regulatory compliance, because we knew that regulatory compliance was going to get more and more stringent with the governance policies that are being applied across the world. But what you'll see the most interesting is accelerate digital business transformation. Yes, it sounds a little bit mouthful, but the reality is this is where all of the process improvement efforts are going into as part of that digital transformation. And you will see that it's growing, right? It went up to 49% in 2020. And that is only going further up, especially with what we have been going through over the past year, where every business has been challenged in how they operate and why they operate the way they operate. And so this is a continuing momentum that you'll start seeing more and more business models being disrupted. And it's an exciting space to be honest, right? So you know that fragmented data and organizations are impeding customer journeys. How can we make it more seamless for them to discover, whether it's the first touch point that you have, to engaging with customers, to understanding and making sure that our customers are happy and are content with our service, whether it's through support and chat. All of this brings that customer journey's full life cycle. And truth is, customers don't really care about your silos. They just want to complete their journey. So how can we help them do that? And this is where I think APIs has a great potential, because the State of API Economy report that Google provided talks about a couple of things. First and foremost is understanding that digital transformation is a top business imperative. It's been for years. And I think COVID-19 and the pandemic has only made the shifting market conditions drive this urgency. This is where you'll start seeing customers now saying, hey, by the way, what we have done in the past year is not just a one-time thing. It is an ongoing effort. And so you will start seeing a lot of that shift. And this is where about 3/4 of organizations are saying, hey, we are going to continue our digital transformation investments. And 2/3 of those companies are actually increasing their investments and evolving their strategies to become digital first companies. Think about that for a moment. To become digital first companies. I don't think that's something that we wake up one morning and like, okay, we're going to be digital first. It's an evolution, and there's a lot of process that goes into the play. So digital transformation has become the organization's ability to create modules, to create services so that we can actually help leverage something that's more repeated. And it's not just about the repeat factor, right? It's also making sure that you have the right governance in place and that every company has valuable data. How do we capitalize on that value? How do we liberate ourselves from those silos? How do we make sure that we are interoperable and reusable in different contexts? And that's where APIs enable those synergies by allowing developers to easily access and combine those digital assets across different systems that probably never were meant to interoperate at all. Now, this is all great, but what I would like you to pay focus on is the 5 key trends that we are seeing. The first and foremost is the increase in SaaS and hybrid cloud API deployments. Talk about what's the future focus and investment. You'll start seeing that APIs are becoming more and more crucial tools. They're serving a variety of use cases, from connecting internal applications to enabling digital ecosystem strategies. And so it's not a surprise that a lot of organizations are now looking to leverage both on-premise and cloud infrastructure together to host these APIs. You'll see the second one, which is around analytics, right? It's expanding those competitive advantage that you have. How do you make sure that you are providing the right API performance and that you are actually creating new routes to innovation? Now, it is important to know that even our customers today, whether they're leading businesses, are using API analytics, not just to inform new decisions and new strategies, but also align some of our leadership goals and outcomes. And this is where I was talking to you about in the beginning of bringing our shared OKRs, whether it is business versus technology or IT. And that's the synergy that we're going to drive further as we go towards creating these API programs that is not just a technological driven methodology, but it's something that's also equally driven by the business. And that's that enterprise superhighway that I was talking to you about. The third aspect is around AI and ML. And I think to this point, we know that API management is also gaining a lot of traction, because it's not just about how to get APIs up and running. It's about the security. It's about the management. How do we make sure that you have the right authentication mechanisms? How do we know that we are not throttling a system, that we're not having DDoS attacks, we're not creating limits, or that we are actually creating the control access and limits, rate limits when API access calls are exceeding a certain limit? How do we make sure that we have the right mechanisms in place? So that's where I think AI and ML powered API security and monitoring will be big, driving some of those momentums going forward. And then we also know that API ecosystems are innovation drivers, right? So you're starting to see more and more of these, whether these are external individuals and organizations coming together across different third-party providers and customers and developers, or it could be internal stakeholders coming together, developers within an organization. And all of these different API maturity levels, so I think, will help define the trends that are coming, whether it is a developer ecosystem or a B2B partner ecosystem around those APIs. And then last but not least is the API security and governance, which is becoming more and more important as we go through this journey, because it's no more just about who has access to what. It's also about the digital maturity that you have. It's also about making sure that our customers, employees, and partners have the right digital mediums to interact. It's also making sure that when you are designing these and managing these properly, that APIs provide that business options that help you control access to the digital assets, to combine old systems with new technologies, to empower developers to experiment, innovate, and react. And it's not just about making sure you have the right proper controls, but it's also providing the methodology and process and frameworks to guide those processes together. And this, I think, is probably the most exciting part of it all. So let me switch over, because I think we are on a precipice where we are starting to see that shift in terms of API-powered digital transformation. But the reality is we still have long ways to go. And the reason why I say we still have long ways to go is because today, if you look at the study that Gartner had in 2018, where they looked at the kinds of business users that are becoming more tech savvy. The first was integration specialists. So you had data integration, whether these were enterprise projects, governance projects. And if you had one of those integration specialists, we started seeing a new business user come into play called the ad hoc integrators. These were line of business projects, those who were trying to bring fit for purpose, like mobile app development or API development. And then you had citizen integrators that were pure business users. And if you had one of the integration specialists, you now have 10 of these ad hoc integrators and about 100x of these citizen integrators. The reality is now we are going to the next wave, which is digital integrators. And these digital integrators are not just here for one specific time. We don't even know if that is going to be 1000x, 10,000x. I think time will tell. Because now you're starting seeing conversational UX, there is intelligent data mapping. And this is where I think diversity and inclusion has a big role to play. And so Slash Data shared this data about female developer population that has actually grown over the past 2 years. And that's a very exciting trend to see, because you are now going to start seeing more and more API developers, whether it's technical writers. There are different audiences that are coming together to create this new female developer population. And that's where I think diversity and inclusion has a big role to play. And this is where I will transition over to my next topic, which is talking to you a little bit about what does that next evolution of APIs look like, and encouraging each of you in the room to take that next step with us. And being part of the Women in APIs community, I highly encourage everyone to think about that aspect. Perhaps not something that you think of every day, but at least make a conscious choice to think about how many women do we have in our API community. Take a look at the conference itself. We are starting to see a big shift in terms of how many folks are actually participating, how many speakers we have. And so these are all efforts that we are driving through the Women in APIs community. And we know the future of APIs is evolving, and we need a better balance to create the best ethical, social, and creative solutions. Now, to create that balance, we also have to work hard to attract and retain more women in the industry. Now, Women in APIs is an example of a community initiative taking action on this. And we have a variety of programs from peer-to-peer speaking and networking events. We have some exciting programs that are coming up. So I highly encourage everyone to check out apidays.global/women in APIs. And this is not one for us to say, hey, we have one step to take forward. There's a lot that we can do together. And I think we all have a role to play in making sure that we're supporting our team members and that we're encouraging folks to think beyond just what we are used to in our day-to-day. So I highly encourage each of us to connect, learn, volunteer, and mentor. And this is where organizations like Women in APIs are helping make that a reality. To wrap it up, here's a quote that I had read at one of the WorldFest Live conferences. And it was an interesting one where they said, Leo Gopal said, API is equal to assume positive intent. And I took it by surprise because I have been part of the API ecosystem, but this was the first time I heard it. So what I would encourage each of you to think of is when you go into that business conversation, assume positive intent and wait to help them better understand what are those shared OKRs. How can we help each other together to make this a reality? Because it's not a step for either you or me to take by ourselves, but as collective and as a community, we can make that happen. And that shift happens within organizations, that shift happens within communities, and that shift happens everywhere around us today. So assume positive intent, and thank you so much for listening to me today. If there is anything that I can help you in terms of providing either as part of my experience as part of Women in APIs or any conversations or brainstorming that you would like, I would love to help out. And I always look at new folks entering API or the technology industry itself. And oftentimes I think we take a step back as women. So I encourage everybody to take that leap of faith and plunge into the next step forward, because this is ours to take forward. Thank you all so much for listening, and have a wonderful rest of your day.